The earth trembled beneath the weight of armies clashing under a blood-red sky. Shields splintered, spears shattered, and the air itself seemed to howl with the fury of gods and mortals locked in a battle that would echo through millennia. This wasn't just war, it was myth-made flesh, a struggle so colossal it blurred the line between history and legend. Picture the Trojan War, where a single wooden horse became the downfall of an empire, or Ragnarök, the Norse apocalypse where gods and giants fought to the death as the world burned around them. These aren't just stories, they're windows into the fears, dreams, and indomitable spirit of ancient cultures, preserved in fire and shadow. Welcome to 30 spectacular tales of mythical warfare, where we strip away the veil of time to explore the most awe-inspiring battles ever conceived by human imagination. From the thunderous charge of the Celts' spectral hosts to the celestial armies of Hindu epics, these conflicts are more than mere folklore, they're cultural DNA, encoded with truths about honor, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. But here's the twist: many of these legends hide grains of real history, buried like treasure waiting to be unearthed. Did you know archaeologists have found evidence suggesting the Trojan War might have been inspired by actual Bronze Age conflicts, or that the Mahabharata's apocalyptic showdown could reflect memories of ancient societal collapse? This is where myth and history collide in a storm of steel and wonder. Over the course of this journey, we'll dissect 30 of the most breathtaking war stories ever told, peeling back layers of exaggeration and symbolism to reveal the human heart beating beneath. You'll witness the cunning strategies of gods and heroes, the tragic fates of doomed warriors, and the eerie parallels between these ancient tales and the wars we fight today. Whether it's the shape-shifting tricksters of Native American battles or the dragon slayers of Chinese legend, each story is a puzzle, one we'll solve together, armed with archaeology, anthropology, and a dash of detective work. So ready your curiosity, the past is calling and its battles have never been more alive. The story of the Trojan War is etched into the fabric of Western civilization, immortalized by Homer's Iliad as a clash of pride, love, and destiny. But beneath the epic poetry lies a tantalizing question: could this 10-year siege have actually happened? Let's start with Troy itself. In the late 19th century, the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann claimed to have discovered the city's ruins in modern-day Turkey, uncovering massive walls and evidence of repeated destruction. While his methods were controversial, later excavations confirmed this was indeed a Bronze Age stronghold, burned and rebuilt multiple times, just like the Troy of legend. Now consider the infamous spark of the war, Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships. While her divine beauty might be myth, the abduction of a high-ranking woman wouldn't have been unusual in the ancient world. Diplomatic marriages were common, and rival kingdoms often clashed over disputes involving royalty. Some historians speculate that Helen's story could symbolize a real political conflict, perhaps a struggle over trade routes or a broken alliance with Troy's rival, Mycenae. The Greeks didn't just fight for honor, they fought for control of the Dardanelles, a vital waterway linking the Aegean to the Black Sea. Homer's tale is packed with supernatural elements, from meddling gods to invincible warriors, but it also mirrors the tactics and technology of the late Bronze Age. The Iliad describes chariots used not for charging into battle, but as mobile platforms for archers, an accurate detail for the time. Even the legendary Trojan horse might have roots in reality. Siege engines resembling horses were used in ancient warfare, and some theories suggest the story could be a metaphor for an earthquake, since Troy sits on a fault line. The gods' intervention, perhaps a way to explain the unpredictability of war, where luck and chaos often decide outcomes. What's most fascinating is how the Greeks themselves viewed the war. To them it wasn't just history, it was a moral lesson. Achilles' rage, Hector's nobility, Odysseus' cunning, these weren't just characters but reflections of human strengths and flaws. The war became a mirror held up to their own society, a way to explore the cost of pride and the fleeting nature of glory, and that's the power of myth. It takes the bones of history and clothes them in meaning, turning forgotten battles into timeless stories. So when we ask, was the Trojan War real? The answer might be stranger than fiction, a war that was both a historical event and a legend, shaped by memory, imagination, and the enduring human need to make sense of the past. The battlefield of Troy wasn't just a stage for mortal men, it was a chessboard where gods moved pieces with divine whims. Picture Zeus weighing the fates of heroes on his golden scales, Athena whispering tactics into Odysseus' ear, or Apollo guiding Paris' arrow straight to Achilles' heel. These weren't mere embellishments, they were the ancient Greeks' way of explaining the unexplainable, the sudden turns of fortune, the uncanny strokes of luck, the moments when war defied human logic. But dig deeper, and you'll find these gods mirrored very real forces: Athena's wisdom, perhaps the voice of experience in a seasoned general; Ares' bloodlust, the raw chaos of combat that swallows even the most disciplined soldiers. Take Achilles, the half-divine warrior whose rage fuels the Iliad. His invulnerability, save for his famous heel, might seem like pure myth until you consider the Mycenaean armor of his era. Warriors clad in bronze were nearly unstoppable in close combat, vulnerable only where their armor gaped. Could the Achilles heel be a poetic metaphor for the fatal weak spot every soldier feared? And his feud with Agamemnon over a captured princess, it echoes the very real tensions of Bronze Age warlords dividing spoils of war, where honor was currency and slights could spark rebellion. Even his grief for Patroclus mirrors the brotherhood of ancient warrior cultures, where bonds between soldiers ran deeper than blood. Then there's Hector, Troy's noble defender, a man torn between duty and love. Unlike Achilles, he fights not for glory but for his city, his wife, his infant son. His tragic end, dragged behind Achilles' chariot, isn't just violence, it's a warning about the cost of hubris. The Greeks revered strength but feared its excess. Hector's humanity his fear, his tenderness makes him the Iliad's true moral compass. In his final moments, as he begs for his body to be returned to his family, we hear the voice of every soldier who ever longed for home. What's startling is how these legends blur with history. Archaeologists have found Mycenaean graves filled with weapons matching Homer's descriptions: boar tusk helmets, figure 8 shields suggesting the poet drew from authentic traditions. Even the gods' interventions might encode real events. When Poseidon shakes the earth to aid the Greeks, could that be a folk memory of earthquakes destabilizing Troy's walls? Or when Aphrodite spirits Paris away from battle, is it a metaphor for the caprice of survival in war? These stories weren't just entertainment, they were lessons etched in blood and bronze. Achilles' choice between a long, forgotten life and a short, glorious one reflects the Greek obsession with Clio's eternal fame. Hector's doomed stand embodies the valor of resisting impossible odds. And woven through it all is the irony that the gods, for all their power, are as flawed as the mortals they toy with. That's the genius of these myths. They show us the divine isn't in the supernatural, but in the very human struggles of love, loss, and the fight for meaning. So when we peel back the layers of divine whimsy, we don't find empty fantasy, we find a mirror. The Trojan War's heroes walk a knife's edge between legend and history, their stories a tapestry of what the Greeks feared, admired, and couldn't quite explain. And that's why they still speak to us 3,000 years later. The Mahabharata isn't just an epic, it's a universe unto itself, a cataclysmic clash where dynasties, destinies, and even the gods themselves collide. Imagine a war so vast it spanned 18 days but left echoes for millennia, a conflict where legendary arrows could blot out the sun and divine chariots lit up the battlefield like falling stars. At its heart lies the Kurukshetra War, a feud between two branches of a royal family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, but to call it a simple family squabble would be like calling a hurricane a summer breeze. This was a war that reshaped the moral and cosmic order, where every sword stroke carried the weight of philosophy, and every betrayal unfolded like a sacred parable. Central to the chaos stands Krishna, the enigmatic prince who serves as both charioteer and divine strategist. His presence blurs the line between mortal and immortal, tactician and deity. When the warrior Arjuna falters on the battlefield, paralyzed by doubt at the thought of killing his own kin, it's Krishna who delivers the Bhagavad Gita, a spiritual manifesto woven into the epic's blood-soaked tapestry. Here the god argues that duty, or dharma, transcends personal grief, that sometimes war is not just inevitable but necessary to restore balance. It's a chilling justification, one that still sparks debate today. Was Krishna advocating righteous violence, or was this a metaphor for the inner battles we all face? Historians have long wondered if this grand spectacle has roots in reality. The Mahabharata's descriptions of cities like Hastinapura and Indraprastha align with archaeological sites along the Ganges, where remnants of ancient fortifications and iron weaponry suggest a society capable of large-scale warfare. The epic's references to advanced astronomy, like the alignment of planets before the war, have led some researchers to pin possible dates, with theories ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. Even the war's aftermath, where entire clans vanish and a new age dawns, mirrors the collapse of India's Bronze Age civilizations, hinting at a cultural memory of societal upheaval. But what makes the Mahabharata timeless isn't just its scale, it's the unbearable humanity of its characters. The Pandava brothers, exiled and humiliated before their triumphant return. Karna, the tragic hero scorned for his birth yet unmatched in honor. Duryodhana, the jealous cousin whose pride consumes him. Their flaws and virtues aren't ancient relics, they're mirrors held up to our own world, where ambition, loyalty, and moral compromise still dictate fates. The war's most haunting lesson: victory can be as hollow as defeat. When the Pandavas finally win, they rule over a wasteland, their families dead, their hearts broken. The epic forces us to ask, what price would you pay for justice? And when the dust settles, who truly wins? Perhaps that's why the Mahabharata endures. It refuses easy answers. Unlike the Trojan War's clear villains and heroes, here every character is shades of gray, every decision a double-edged sword. The weapons may be mythical, the celestial Brahmastra that could level mountains, the enchanted bow Gandhava, but the emotions are painfully real. In the end, the Mahabharata isn't just about a war. It's about the cost of righteousness, the illusion of control, and the quiet truth that history, whether etched in stone or whispered as myth, is written by those who survive to tell it. The weapons of the Mahabharata don't just kill, they unravel the fabric of reality itself. Take the Brahmastra, a weapon so devastating it's said to mimic the force of creation. When unleashed, it could scorch the land for generations, leaving entire regions barren and lifeless. Ancient texts describe its effects with eerie precision: boiling rivers, crumbling mountains, and an eerie silence that follows, as if nature itself holds its breath. But here's the chilling question: could these descriptions be more than poetic exaggeration? Some researchers point to sites like Mohenjo-Daro, where archaeologists found skeletal remains with radiation like burns and vitrified stones, hinting at an ancient catastrophe eerily similar to a nuclear blast. The Mahabharata even warns of hair loss and sickness in survivors, symptoms chillingly reminiscent of radiation poisoning. Then there's the Pashupatastra, a weapon belonging to Shiva, capable of annihilating all life in its path. Unlike brute force destruction, it's described as seeking its targets with terrifying precision, almost like a modern smart missile guided by unseen forces. The Agnyastra, another fearsome tool, rained fire so intense it could melt metal and stone, while the Varanastra summoned tsunamis to swallow entire armies. These aren't just mythical flourishes, they read like a catalogue of advanced warfare. each weapon specializing in a distinct form of mass destruction. Skeptics dismiss these as pure imagination, but consider this: civilizations like the Indus Valley were masters of urban planning and metallurgy, with knowledge that rivaled their contemporaries. Could they have stumbled upon forgotten technologies, later mythologized? The Vedic texts speak of Vimanas, flying chariots equipped with weapons, and detail complex machinery that seems out of place in antiquity. When the Mahabharata describes arrows that roar like thunder and leave craters, it's hard not to draw parallels to artillery or even directed energy weapons. Yet perhaps the most haunting detail isn't the weapons themselves, but the rules surrounding their use. The epic insists these armaments were never meant for petty conflicts; they were last resorts bound by sacred codes. Warriors who misused them faced cosmic repercussions, their legacies cursed for generations. This moral framework mirrors modern debates about nuclear ethics and how to wield power without inviting self-destruction. The Mahabharata doesn't just warn of physical devastation, it foreshadows the psychological toll of war without limits, where victory comes at the cost of one's humanity. So were these weapons real? The answer may lie somewhere between myth and memory. Ancient cultures often encoded truths in symbolism, blending observation with allegory. A collapsing society might remember earthquakes as divine wrath, or drought as a weapon of the gods, but the specificity of these accounts, the vivid details, the cause and effect sequences, suggests something more. Whether inspired by lost technology or prophetic imagination, the Mahabharata's arsenal forces us to confront an unsettling idea that the line between ancient myth and modern warfare might be thinner than we think. The sky split open with a sound like 1,000 snapping bones as Ragnarök, the doom of the gods, descends upon the Norse cosmos. This isn't just an ending, it's a fiery rebirth, a cataclysm so total it consumes even the gods themselves. Imagine towering giants wading through flaming rivers, the great wolf Fenrir swallowing the sun whole, and the world serpent Jörmungandr rising from the sea to poison the heavens. At the center of this chaos strides Odin, the All-Father, cloaked in fate's shadow. He knows how this battle ends. Prophecy has foretold his death beneath Fenrir's jaws, yet he gathers his champions in Valhalla, preparing for a fight he cannot win. That's the brutal beauty of Ragnarök. It's not about victory, but defiance in the face of inevitability. Thor, the thunder god, embodies this stubborn courage. His destiny is just as grim: to slay Jörmungandr in a clash so violent it shakes Yggdrasil, the world tree, only to stagger 9 steps and collapse from the serpent's venom. Even in death, though, his hammer Mjolnir remains a symbol of protection, a last stand against the encroaching dark. Meanwhile, Loki, the trickster bound in chains for his crimes, breaks free to lead the armies of chaos. His role is pivotal, not just as a villain but as the catalyst of change. The Norse didn't see him as purely evil, he was necessary disruption, the spark that burns down the old to make way for the new. What's striking is how deeply Ragnarök mirrors Viking values. These were a people who thrived in harsh climates, who sailed into storms knowing the odds. Their myths didn't promise happy endings, they promised meaning. The idea that even gods could fall, yet still choose to fight, resonated with warriors who faced icy seas and uncertain raids. Ragnarök isn't just destruction, it's cyclical like the seasons. After the battle, the earth resurfaces from the waters, green and fertile. 2 human survivors repopulate the world, and a new pantheon emerges. This wasn't nihilism, it was a radical acceptance of impermanence, a belief that endings seed new beginnings. Archaeological finds like the Gosforth Cross in England carve Ragnarök's imagery alongside Christian motifs, showing how these stories persisted even as Scandinavia converted. The parallels are uncanny: a great battle, a world consumed by fire, a select few reborn. Some scholars argue these myths influenced medieval apocalyptic visions, proving their cultural staying power. But Ragnarok's true legacy lies in its raw honesty. Unlike other mythologies where order triumphs, here chaos wins temporarily. The Vikings didn't sugarcoat existence, they honored the struggle. So when Odin raises his spear Gungnir for the last time, or Tyr, the one-handed god of justice, faces the hound Garmr, these aren't just acts of heroism, they're lessons etched in blood and frost. Ragnarök teaches that destiny isn't something to outrun, but to meet head-on, weapon in hand, and perhaps that's why it still chills us today. In a world of uncertainty, the idea that courage matters more than survival feels both terrifying and strangely comforting. The gods knew they'd lose, they fought anyway. The fires of Ragnarök don't just burn away the old world, they forge a new one from the ashes. Amid the wreckage of fallen gods and broken realms, two figures emerge: Vidar, the silent avenger, and Vali, the god of vengeance. While Odin and Thor meet their fates, these lesser-known survivors embody the Norse belief that destruction is never absolute. Vidar, wearing a shoe crafted from the leather of all human time, steps forward to slay the monstrous wolf Fenrir, tearing its jaws apart with his bare hands. His survival isn't luck, it's design. The Vikings saw him as the embodiment of resilience, a force that outlasts even the gods themselves. Vali, born specifically to avenge Baldur's death, represents justice's persistence no matter how delayed. Together they signal that some threads of the old order remain unbroken, ready to weave a new tapestry. This cyclical vision of apocalypse sets Norse mythology apart. Unlike the linear doomsdays of Christianity or Zoroastrianism, where evil is vanquished forever, Ragnarök acknowledges chaos as eternal. The world doesn't end, it resets. Two human survivors, Lif and Lifthrasir, hide in the world tree Yggdrasil's branches, emerging to repopulate the earth. Their names mean life and desire for life, a poetic nod to humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender. Even the gods are reborn. Baldur returns from Hel's realm, and Honir takes up the mantle of leadership. The sun, swallowed by Fenrir, is reborn from its daughter, brighter than before. This isn't just storytelling, it's a metaphor for Scandinavia's harsh winters giving way to spring, for the Vikings' unyielding spirit in the face of frozen seas and failed harvests. Parallels ripple across global mythologies. The Hindu concept of pralaya describes a periodic dissolution of the universe, followed by renewal under Brahma's breath. Aztec lore speaks of 5 suns each era ending in catastrophe, only for a new age to dawn. Even the biblical flood, with Noah's Ark carrying the seeds of rebirth, echoes this universal theme. But Ragnarök's rawness is unique. There's no final judgment, no eternal paradise, just the understanding that struggle is perpetual and survival demands adaptability. Archaeology hints at why this resonated. Viking settlements from Greenland to Russia faced constant threats: climate shifts, raids, famine. A myth where even gods die, yet life continues, would have offered cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The Golgotha stones of Sweden depict Ragnarök's imagery alongside Christian crosses, showing how these ideas endured conversion. The message was clear: endings aren't defeats. They're doorways. What makes Ragnarök timeless is its refusal to sugarcoat existence. Modern dystopian tales often borrow its DNA: stories where heroes lose, yet hope flickers in the ruins. From Mad Max to The Road, our fascination with post-apocalyptic survival mirrors the Vikings' grim optimism. Their myth admits that darkness wins sometimes, but insists dawn comes after. Not because destiny decrees it, but because someone, whether a god, a human, or the earth itself, chooses to begin again. The date of the Kurukshetra War has haunted historians for centuries, a puzzle wrapped in celestial clues and crumbling ruins. According to the Mahabharata itself, the conflict erupted at the dawn of Kali Yuga, an age of discord said to have begun around 3100 BCE. But can we trust ancient texts as timelines? Surprisingly, modern science offers tantalizing hints. astronomers have combed the epic's descriptions of planetary alignment-specific constellations, eclipses, and even the positions of Jupiter and Saturn to triangulate possible dates. One compelling study pinpoints a unique celestial configuration around 3262 BCE, when all 7 traditional planets clustered in the zodiac sign of Magha, just as the epic describes. Another calculation, based on the repeated mention of a falling star or comet, aligns with meteor activity recorded in Chinese annals near the same period. Digging deeper, archaeology whispers its own corroborations. Excavations at sites like Hastinapura, the Kuru kingdom's capital, reveal layers of ash and warfare debris dating to the early 3rd millennium BCE. Pottery fragments, iron weapons, and even the remnants of grand halls match descriptions in the Mahabharata. Near Kurukshetra itself, groundwater studies show traces of ancient river channels, possibly the long-lost Saraswati River, where the epic claims armies camped before battle. Most striking are skeletal remains found scattered in clusters, some with arrowheads embedded in bone, suggesting large-scale combat, yet the Kali Yuga connection raises bigger questions. Hindu cosmology divides time into cyclical epochs, each marked by moral decline. Kali Yuga's onset wasn't just a calendar shift, it symbolized humanity's fall from grace, triggered by the war's betrayals and bloodshed. The Mahabharata laments how Dharma stood on one leg afterward, as lies and greed poisoned society. Intriguingly, geological records from 3100 BC show abrupt climate shifts, droughts and seismic activity that could have spurred migrations, wars, and the collapse of India's once stable agrarian cultures. Was the Kali Yuga not just metaphor, but memory? Critics argue these links are circumstantial, that myths borrow freely from collective trauma, but the Mahabharata's eerie precision lingers. It describes battle formations, medical treatments, and even war ethics that align with Bronze Age practices. The chariots, the use of poisoned arrows, the sacred oaths broken, all reflect a society teetering between honor and survival. Perhaps the truth isn't binary. The Kurukshetra War may not have happened exactly as sung by sages, but as a seismic event so catastrophic it fractured history into before and after. What endures is the war's shadow. Across India, villages still mark Kurukshetra in local lore, pointing to fields where arrows once rained like hail. Pilgrims bathe in ponds said to be stained with warriors' blood. Whether memory or myth, the battle's imprint on culture is undeniable, and that's the power of these stories. They don't just record events. They encode truths about who we are, how we break, and what survives when the dust settles. The ground split open with a roar as the giants clawed their way up from Tartarus, their serpentine legs coiling around mountains, their eyes burning with primal fury. This was the Gigantomachy, the war to end all wars, where the Olympian gods faced their most ancient enemies, in a clash that would decide the fate of the cosmos. Imagine Zeus hurling lightning bolts that shattered entire peaks, Athena driving her spear through the throat of a towering giant, or Dionysus wielding a thesis wrapped in ivy that ensnared his foes like living vines. Unlike the Trojan War's mortal struggles, this battle was elemental, a fight for the very order of the universe. But why did these myths grip the Greek imagination so fiercely? The answer lies in the land itself. Greece sits on a geological knife edge, where tectonic plates collide, and volcanoes like Thura, modern Santorini, periodically rewrite the landscape. When the poet Hesiod described the giants hurling flaming oak trees and storm-footed Enceladus buried beneath Sicily, he might have been echoing folk memories of eruptions or earthquakes. The giant Typhon, with his 100 dragon heads and lava-spewing mouths, bears an uncanny resemblance to volcanic activity, his body pinned under Mount Etna, where rumblings still suggest restless power beneath the earth. The Gigantomachy wasn't just spectacle, it was symbolism carved in fire and stone. For the Greeks, the giants represented chaos, untamed nature, rebellion against divine order. Their defeat by the Olympians mirrored civilization's struggle to tame wild lands, to build cities where forests once stood. Even the gods' tactics carried meaning. Athena didn't just overpower her foe, the giant Alcyoneus, she dragged him beyond the borders of his homeland, exploiting a prophecy to ensure his death. Cleverness over brute force, strategy over savagery, this was the Greek ideal. Archaeology adds another layer. The great altar of Pergamon, with its frieze of writhing giants and gods locked in combat, wasn't just art, it was propaganda. Built by a Hellenistic kingdom, it linked their rule to the Olympians' victory, implying they too defended order against chaos. Meanwhile, local cults worshipped giants as earth deities, suggesting older, pre-Olympian beliefs lurked beneath the official myths. The Gigantomachy wasn't a single story but a cultural palimpsest, rewritten with each new era. What lingers today is the primal thrill of the battle's imagery, the sheer scale of gods and giants hurling islands as weapons, the earth groaning under their footsteps. Modern parallels abound, from superhero clashes to climate disaster narratives. The Gigantomachy reminds us that every culture grapples with the same question: how do we survive a world that sometimes feels intent on breaking itself apart? The Greeks answered with defiance, with gods who stood firm against the storm, and in that perhaps lies the myth's enduring power. The air vibrated with the thunder of hooves as Queen Medb's army surged across Ulster, their target not a fortress or a throne, but a single mythic bull. The Tainbo Cuelge, or cattle raid of Cooley, is no ordinary war story. It's a whirlwind of magic, bloodshed, and psychological warfare, where the fate of kingdoms hinges on the theft of a beast said to be descended from the gods. At the center stands Cu Chulainn, the Hound of Ulster, a boy warrior whose feats defy mortal limits. But strip away the supernatural sheen, and you'll find a startlingly accurate portrait of Iron Age Ireland, where cattle were currency, honor was law, and a single man could hold the line against an entire army. Cu Chulainn's defense of Ulster reads like a fever dream of combat. He battles with a gíbalga, a barbed spear that explodes into 30 projectiles upon impact. He enters a supernatural battle frenzy called the Ryostrad, his body contorting into a monstrous shape, his screams shaking the earth. Yet woven between these fantastical elements are glimpses of real Iron Age combat. His use of chariots matches archaeological finds of Celtic war vehicles, complete with iron-rimmed wheels and lightweight frames. The Táin describes warriors fighting in single combat, a tradition echoed in Roman accounts of Celtic tribes, where champions would duel to decide battles before the armies clashed. Even Cu Chulainn's youthful exploits, like beheading 3 sons of a rival chieftain, mirror the Celtic practice of taking heads as trophies, a ritual confirmed by bog bodies and ancient texts. But the raid's true stakes weren't just territorial, they were existential. In Celtic society, cattle represented wealth, status, and even cosmic power. The bull at the heart of the conflict, the Don Cuelge, wasn't just livestock, it symbolized Ulster's sovereignty. When Queen Medb of Connacht launched her invasion, she wasn't merely stealing property, she was attempting to strip her rivals of their very identity. This reflects the fragile alliances of pre-Christian Ireland, where petty kingdoms rose and fell based on raids, hostages, and carefully negotiated truces. The Táin even hints at the political maneuvering behind the war. Medb's husband Ailill owns a rival bull, sparking her jealousy. This domestic squabble escalates into full-scale war, proving how personal slights could ignite generations of bloodshed. Cu Chulainn's tragic arc reveals the darker side of Celtic heroism. Bound by Gisa sacred taboos that dictate his actions, he's forced to accept every challenge, even when it's clearly a trap. When faced with his foster brother Ferdiad in battle, the fight lasts for days, their mutual respect deepening the horror. The Táin doesn't glorify war, it exposes its futility. The bull Medb steals ultimately kills its Connacht rival and then drops dead, rendering the entire conflict meaningless. the survivors are left to count their dead, their victory hollow. Archaeology breathes life into these legends. The landscapes described in the Táin fords, ring forts, and sacred groves align with Iron Age sites across modern Ireland. The ritual sacrifices of bulls, the intricate gold ornaments worn by elites, even the psychological warfare tactics, all find echoes in Celtic artifacts and Roman chronicles. The Táin might be myth, but its bones are real. It's a window into a world where honor was worth more than life, where a hero's name outlasted kingdoms, and where the line between man and legend was as thin as the mist over an Ulster battlefield. Cuchulain's body twists like a storm-tossed oak, his muscles contorting until his limbs writhe like serpents, his jaw unhinges like a beast's, and his hair stands erect, each strand tipped with blood. This is the Rhyastrad, the warp spasm, a transformation so horrific it sends seasoned warriors fleeing in terror. But this isn't just poetic exaggeration, it's a window into the psyche of Iron Age warrior culture. The Rhyastrad mirrors the berserker rage of Norse legends, where fighters like the Ulfhid Nar donned wolf pelts and fought in a trance-like fury, biting shields and ignoring wounds. Similar frenzies appear across Indo-European traditions, the Greek Lyssa, a madness gifted by gods in battle, or the Vedic Manu, a sacred fury that turned warriors into avatars of destruction. These weren't just stories, they were reflections of real ritual combat states, possibly induced by fasting, chants, or even psychoactive plants. What makes Cuchulain's fury unique is its duality. His spasms aren't just destructive, they're cyclical. After slaughtering hundreds, he collapses, his humanity rushing back in waves of grief. The Táin describes his allies plunging him into vats of cold water to calm him, the water boiling from his heat. This push and pull between monster and man echoes the Celtic concept of Gisa taboos that bound heroes to both glory and tragedy. Unlike the one-dimensional berserkers of other myths, Cuchulain's rage is a curse as much as a gift, a price paid for his supernatural prowess. Archaeology offers eerie parallels. Celtic artifacts depict warriors with bulging eyes and contorted limbs, akin to Cuchulain's spasms. The Gundestrup cauldron, a silver masterpiece from Denmark, shows horned figures mid-transformation, suggesting these myths stemmed from shared warrior initiation rites. Even the Roman historian Tacitus noted Celtic fighters entering battle in a holy madness, their bodies painted like specters to induce terror. The Rhyastrad might symbolize the liminal state between human and divine, where warriors became conduits for otherworldly power. But beneath the spectacle lies a darker truth. The Táin doesn't glorify Cuchulain's rampages, it mourns them. His kills include friends, allies, even boys sent to delay him, their deaths haunting him long after the battle ends. This complexity sets Celtic myth apart. Their heroes aren't invincible demigods, but flawed men wrestling with forces beyond their control. The warp spasm isn't just a weapon, it's a metaphor for war's dehumanizing grip, where victory and trauma walk hand in hand. Yet the Rhyastrad also hints at survival. In a world where kingdoms rose and fell like tides, where a single raid could erase a tribe's future, the ability to summon inhuman strength wasn't just legend, it was hope. Cuchulain's fury whispers an ancient reassurance. Even when outnumbered, even when doomed, the human spirit can burn bright enough to carve its name into history. Thebes wasn't just a city, it was a tinderbox of fate, where every stone seemed soaked in prophecy and every throne came with a curse. The cycle of violence began long before swords were drawn, with Oedipus, the king who solved the Sphinx's riddle only to unravel his own life. His story is the first domino in a chain reaction of war, where personal tragedy escalates into generational bloodshed. When Oedipus gouges out his eyes upon discovering he's unknowingly killed his father and married his mother, he doesn't just leave a vacuum of power, he ignites a feud between his sons, Eteocles and Polynices, that will tear Thebes apart. Their agreement to share the throne crumbles into greed, culminating in Polynices raising an army from Argos, to reclaim what he sees as his birthright. This isn't just a family dispute, it's the spark for one of Greek mythology's most brutal wars, the Seven against Thebes. Picture the Argive champions, each sworn to Polynus's cause, storming Thebes' 7 gates. The imagery is apocalyptic capes stained with sacrificial blood, shields emblazoned with monstrous symbols, and a sense of impending doom so thick even the gods hold their breath. The warrior Tydeus, mortally wounded, gnaws at the skull of his slain enemy in a final act of savagery. The seer Amphiaraus, swallowed whole by the earth as he prophesied, becomes a living omen of the war's futility. Yet the most haunting figure is Eteocles himself, who faces his brother in single combat at the city's last gate. Their duel ends in mutual slaughter, a grotesque mirror of their shared bloodline. Thebes survives, but at what cost? The streets are littered with corpses, the altars desecrated, and the royal house extinct, but the war doesn't end there. A generation later, the Epigoni, the sons of the original 7, march on Thebes to finish what their fathers failed to do. This time the city falls, its walls crumbling under the weight of its own cursed legacy. The cycle completes when the victorious Epigoni install their Sander, Polynus's son, on the throne, yet the victory feels hollow. Thebes is a shell of its former glory, its people weary of kings and curses. What makes these wars endure isn't their scale, it's their intimacy. Unlike the Trojan War's geopolitical stakes or the Gigantomach's cosmic battles, the Theban conflicts are human-sized tragedies. They explore how pride festers, how oaths twist into nooses, and how the sins of fathers poison the futures of sons. The playwright Aeschylus saw this firsthand when he staged 7 against Thebes, using the myth to critique Athens' own political divisions. Sophocles went further in Antigone, showing how the war's aftermath pits moral duty against state law, as Oedipus' daughter defies King Creon to bury her brother Polynus's. These plays weren't just entertainment, they were cautionary tales about the cost of stubbornness and the fragility of power. Archaeology lends eerie credence to the myths. Thebes' real-world counterpart, modern-day Theva, shows evidence of violent destruction in the late Bronze Age, coinciding with the collapse of Mycenaean palaces. The city's strategic position made it a battleground for rival kingdoms, much like its mythical counterpart. Even the 7 gates have a basis. Thebes' topography naturally funnels invaders toward specific entry points, turning legend into tactical reality. The Theban Wars remind us that the greatest conflicts aren't fought over gold or land, but over legacy. Oedipus' curse isn't supernatural, it's the weight of expectations, the fear of becoming what we despise. When Eteocles and Polynus die, their bodies are so mangled they're cremated together, their ashes mingling in death as they never could in life. It's a bitter irony that defines Thebes, a city forever rebuilding atop its own ruins, its stories warning us that the past is never truly buried. The flames of Troy had barely cooled when Aeneas, prince of the fallen city, shouldered his aging father and carried him through the smoldering ruins, his young son clutching his hand as they fled into the unknown. This wasn't just escape, it was the birth of a legend, a journey that would weave itself into the bedrock of Roman identity. Virgil's Aeneid paints Aeneas as more than a survivor, he's a man haunted by duty, chosen by the gods to found a new homeland far to the west. But this isn't just a hero's tale, it's political alchemy, a masterstroke by Emperor Augustus to recast Rome's chaotic history as divine destiny. Aeneas's Odyssey is etched with trials that mirror Rome's own struggles. Shipwrecked on Carthage's shores, he encounters Queen Dido, whose passion for him burns as fiercely as the funeral pyre she builds when he abandons her to fulfill his fate. Their tragedy isn't just personal, it foreshadows the Punic Wars, Rome's mortal rivalry with Carthage. In the underworld, Aeneas's father Anchises shows him a procession of future Roman heroes, from Romulus to Augustus himself, binding past and future in an unbroken chain. Even the battles in Italy, where Aeneas fights the local king Turnus, echo Rome's real wars of unification, blending myth with conquest. Virgil didn't write in a vacuum. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was reeling from civil wars, its republic shattered. Augustus, the adopted heir of Julius Caesar, needed to legitimize his rule as more than raw power. He needed to be destiny's chosen. The Aeneid delivered that, casting Augustus as the culmination of Aeneas's sacrifices, the promised ruler foretold by Jupiter. Virgil's genius was in making propaganda feel like prophecy. The poem's famous opening, "I sing of arms and a man," reframes Aeneas as both warrior and pilgrim, his struggles mirroring Rome's rise from humble beginnings to world power. Archaeology whispers corroborations. The Lavinium settlement, said to be founded by Aeneas's son Ascanius, reveals votive statues of Trojan deities dating to Rome's early days. The Aeneid's descriptions of rituals like the Lusus Troia, a cavalry game performed by noble youths, match artifacts and frescoes from Augustus's era. Even the shield of Aeneas, forged by Vulcan to depict Rome's future triumphs, mirrors the Augustus's own monument, the Ara Pacis, which celebrated his reign as a golden age. But the Aeneid's true power lies in its ambiguity. Aeneas isn't a triumphant conqueror, he's a weary man who buries comrades and sacrifices love for duty. His final act, killing Turnus in a fit of rage, leaves the poem's ending unsettling. Was Rome's birth truly glorious, or stained with the blood of the defeated? Virgil died before finishing the work, leaving clues that he might have questioned Augustus's vision. This tension between destiny and doubt makes the epic timeless. It asks whether any empire, no matter how grand, can escape the shadows of its founding violence. So when Augustus displayed the Aeneid in public libraries, he wasn't just celebrating art. He was rewriting history itself, turning myth into a mirror that reflected his authority as fate's design. Yet the poem outlasted him, becoming something richer, a reminder that even the mightiest nations are built on stories, and those stories are never simple. The moment Aeneas sets foot on Carthage's shores, the air hums with destiny and doom. Dido, the Phoenician queen who built a glittering city from exile, welcomes the Trojan refugees with open arms, her heart already unwittingly ensnared by the gods' designs. Their love story burns bright and fast, a wildfire of passion that threatens to consume them both. But here's the tragedy: their romance was never meant to last. Venus orchestrates their union to protect Aeneas, while Juno, Rome's eternal nemesis, hopes to derail his fate. Dido is more than a love-struck queen, she's collateral damage in the divine machinery of empire. Their nights in the caves during a hunting storm, their whispered vows under the stars, these aren't just poetic flourishes, they're the fragile dreams of two people caught between duty and desire. When Mercury descends to remind Aeneas of his mission, the prince's face is pale with dread. He knows the cost of leaving, yet he goes anyway, his ships slipping away at dawn like thieves. Dido's rage is volcanic. She curses Aeneas' descendants, the Romans, into eternal enmity with her people, a prophecy that would manifest in the Punic Wars, where Carthage was razed to the ground. Her final act is a tableau of devastation, building a pyre of Aeneas' abandoned gifts, stabbing herself with his sword, and dying as the flames climb, her last words a promise of vengeance echoing through history. Virgil's genius lies in the parallels. Dido's Carthage is Rome's mirror, both cities founded by exiles, both rising from nothing. Her tragedy isn't just personal, it's geopolitical. The Aeneid was written during Augustus' reign, as Rome grappled with the moral weight of its expanding empire. Dido's curse forces the audience to ask, what justifies conquest? What debt do the conquerors owe the conquered? Her death isn't merely a spurned lover's exit, it's the scream of every culture crushed under Rome's sandals. Archaeology lends eerie resonance. Excavations at Carthage reveal child sacrifices in Tophets, echoing Dido's self-immolation. The city's layout, with its circular harbor, mirrors Virgil's descriptions, blurring myth and memory. And when Rome finally destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE, they salted the earth, a brutal fulfillment of Dido's curse, as if history itself couldn't escape the Aeneid's shadow. Yet Dido's legacy outlasted Rome. Medieval poets painted her as a cautionary tale against passion, while modern readings reclaim her as a feminist icon defying patriarchal fate. Her story transcends its imperial framing, becoming a universal lament for the displaced, the used, the silenced. Every time Aeneas sails away, we're left with her pyre's smoke, a reminder that empires aren't built on glory alone, but on the ashes of those who loved too much in their path. The rivers of Izumo ran red as the eight-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi coiled round the mountains, its crimson eyes gleaming with hunger. Each year, the beast demanded a sacrifice, another daughter of the storm god Susanu's host family, until only one remained. But when the exiled god Susanu arrived, disheveled and rebellious from his banishment from heaven, he saw not just a monster, but an opportunity. This wasn't merely a hero's quest, it was a calculated act of redemption, wrapped in layers of political symbolism that would echo through Japan's imperial legacy. Susanu's strategy was as cunning as it was brutal. He brewed 8 vats of potent sake, positioning them behind gates to lure each of Orochi's heads. When the serpent drank itself into a stupor, he severed its heads one by one, uncovering the sacred sword Kusanagi in its tail, a weapon that would later become one of Japan's 3 imperial regalia. But look deeper and the myth reveals more than a monster-slaying romp. Orochi's 8 heads and tails, its serpentine body spanning valleys, could symbolize the unpredictable rivers of Izumo, whose floods regularly devastated settlements. The sake might represent early flood control efforts, levees, or diversion channels taming nature's wrath through ingenuity. The timing is telling. This legend was codified in the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, 8th century texts commissioned by the Yamato court to legitimize their rule. Susanu, the outsider god, cleanses the land for his descendant Ninigi, whose lineage would found Japan's imperial dynasty. Orochi's slaughter isn't just victory, it's propaganda, framing the Yamato as bringers of order against chaos. Even the sword Kusanagi, later wielded by emperors, becomes a divine mandate, proof that the gods themselves sanctioned their reign. Archaeology whispers support. Izumo's ancient shrines, like the Grand Izumo Taisha, align with regions where early Yamato influence expanded. Ritual swords from the Kofun period mirror Kusanaga's description, suggesting myths were grafted onto real regalia. And Orochi's connection to rivers, Izumo's geography, prone to flooding from the high river, makes the serpent a perfect metaphor for nature's caprice and humanity's struggle to control it. Yet the myth's power lies in its duality. Susanu isn't a flawless hero, he's a troublemaker turned savior, his violence tinged with redemption. Orochi isn't mindless evil, it's a force of nature, demanding respect even in death. This complexity elevates the tale beyond mere royal propaganda. It's a meditation on balance, how chaos and order, destruction and renewal, are intertwined. When Susanu plants Kusanagi in the earth, he doesn't just claim the land, he acknowledges the price of peace, and that's why, centuries later, the serpent's shadow still slithers through Japan's cultural memory, not as a defeated foe, but as a reminder that every empire is built on the bones of the wild. The world began in silence, an endless, swirling chaos of formless elements drifting in the void. Then, like the first notes of a cosmic melody, the gods themselves took shape. The Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, doesn't just describe creation, it paints a celestial drama of sibling rivalries, betrayals, and battles so intense they shape the very fabric of reality. At the heart of this mythology stands Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess whose withdrawal into a cave plunges the world into darkness, and her tempestuous brother Susanu, whose wild antics spark divine conflict. But these aren't just whimsical tales, they're the sacred scaffolding of imperial legitimacy. carefully crafted to weave the emperor's lineage directly into the realm of the gods. Amaterasu and Susanu's feud begins with a ritual, ordered by their father Izanagi to divide the world between them. Susanu should rule the seas, while Amaterasu governs the heavens. But Susanu, ever the provocateur, refuses to accept his domain. In a fit of rage, he hurls a flayed horse into Amaterasu's sacred weaving hall, shattering the looms and killing one of her attendants. The violence isn't random, it mirrors the destructive forces of storms and earthquakes that ancient Japanese communities feared. Amaterasu's retreat into the Aim no Iwado cave, hiding the sun's light from the world, reflects a primal anxiety: what happens when order itself abandons humanity? The gods' solution is as theatrical as it is profound. They stage a raucous celebration outside the cave, luring Amaterasu's curiosity with laughter, music, and the lewd dancing of the goddess Aim no Uzum. When Amaterasu peeks out, the mirror they've hung the Yata no Kagami captures her own radiance, dazzling her long enough for the gods to drag her back into the world. Light returns, but the message is clear: balance requires both chaos and harmony, represented by Susanu's tempests and Amaterasu's warmth. This duality would become central to Shinto thought, where even destructive forces like typhoons are seen as part of nature's sacred rhythm. Yet the myth's political underpinnings run deeper. When Susanu is banished from heaven, his descent to earth leads him to Izumo, where he slays the serpent Yamata no Orochi and claims the sword Kusanagi. Generations later, this same sword, along with the mirror and jewel used to lure Amaterasu, would be passed to her grandson Ninigi, sent to rule the earthly realm. According to the Kojiki, Ninigi's great-grandson became Japan's first emperor, Jinmu, forging an unbroken line of divine sovereignty that endured for millennia. The imperial regalia weren't just symbols, they were living proof of the emperor's God-given mandate, anchoring his authority in the celestial order itself. Archaeology breathes life into these legends. The Yata no Kagami, said to be housed at Ai's Grand Shrine, echoes Bronze Age mirrors found in burial mounds, suggesting their ritual importance predates the Kojiki's writing. The sword Kusanagi, enshrined at Atsuta, matches ceremonial blades from the Kofun period, linking myth to material culture. Even the cave of Aim no Iwado is traditionally identified with a specific grotto in Kyushu, where rituals still reenact Amaterasu's return. These aren't mere coincidences, they're evidence of how myths were anchored in real landscapes, merging spiritual belief with political geography. But the Kojiki's genius lies in its ambiguity. While it served imperial interests, it also preserved older, localized traditions. Susanu, though cast as a disruptive figure, became a folk hero in Izumo, where he's revered as a bringer of agriculture and medicine. Amaterasu's retreat isn't just a parable of order's fragility, it's a metaphor for winter's darkness, with her emergence symbolizing the sun's renewal at the solstice. The gods' messy, emotionally charged relationships reflect very human struggles, making their stories endure long after the imperial system they once legitimized faded. So when the Kojiki recounts these divine battles, it's not just recording myth, it's mapping a worldview where politics and spirituality are inseparable. The emperor's divinity wasn't mere propaganda, it was woven into the cosmos as inevitable as the sunrise, and that's why these ancient conflicts still resonate. They remind us that every culture's power structures are, at their core, stories told with enough conviction to shape reality itself. The clang of steel echoes across the plains of Persia as Rostam, the mightiest of all champions, swings his fabled sword with the strength of 1,000 men. His name alone sends armies fleeing, not just a warrior, but a force of nature woven into the very soul of Iranian identity. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, isn't merely an epic, it's a cultural lifeline, preserving pre-Islamic Persia's language, values, and legends through centuries of upheaval. And at its heart thunders Rostam, a hero whose exploits blur the line between myth and memory, his battles etching themselves into the bedrock of a civilization. Take his legendary duel with the white demon, Divisepid. Hidden in a mountain fortress, this monstrous foe had slaughtered countless warriors before Rostam tracked him through 7 impossible trials, scorching deserts, enchanted lakes, even a sorceress's illusions, each a metaphor for the psychological gauntlet of heroism. When he finally faces the demon, their battle shakes the earth, Rostam's strength fueled by divine favor and raw determination. But here's the twist: the demon isn't just a monster. He's a mirror reflecting Rostam's own inner demons, the pride, the rage, the cost of his destiny. Victory comes at a price, as it always does in the Shahnameh. Rostam's most haunting conflict isn't against demons or sorcerers, though, it's against his own son, Sohrab. Tricked by fate and the machinations of kings, Rostam meets the young warrior on the battlefield, neither knowing their blood ties until it's too late. Their duel is a masterpiece of tragic irony. Sohrab's youth and skill nearly overwhelm Rostam, who finally strikes a mortal blow only to discover his dying opponent wears the armband he once gave his lost love. The moment Rostam tears open Sohrab's tunic, revealing the token, the world collapses into a single unbearable truth. This isn't just a father's grief, it's the Shahnameh's central tragedy, how even the greatest heroes are pawns of destiny, their victories laced with irreversible loss. But why does Rostam endure? Because Ferdowsi crafted him as more than a warrior. He's a cultural anchor, composed in the 10th century, when Persian identity was under siege by Arab conquests. The Shahnameh defiantly preserved the Persian language and Zoroastrian ethos. Rostam's values loyalty to the crown, reverence for the divine, and unyielding courage were a blueprint for Persian ideals. His battles against Iranian invaders mirrored real clashes between Persians and Central Asian nomads, transforming history into myth and myth into national identity. Today, Rostam's legacy lives in unexpected ways. Iranian children grow up hearing his stories, his face adorns murals and band notes. Even his famed horse, Rak, symbolizes resilience, a companion so loyal it leaps into hellfire to save its master. Archaeologists have found motifs from the Shahnameh on ancient pottery, while modern filmmakers and musicians reinterpret his tales, proving that 1,000 years haven't dulled his edge. The Shahnameh's genius lies in its duality. Rostam isn't invincible, he's flawed, grieving, burdened by the weight of his legend. His stories aren't just entertainment, they're a conversation about power, sacrifice, and what it means to be Persian. When Ferdowsi wrote, "I've revived Persia with my poetry," he wasn't boasting, he was reminding us that heroes don't just fight battles, they keep civilizations alive. And in Rostam's shadow, Persia still stands. The morning mist clung to the battlefield as Rostam faced the young warrior, neither knowing the cruel twist fate had woven for them. Sohrab, tall and golden-haired like his father, bore the confidence of youth, his armor gleaming, his sword humming through the air with a skill few could match. For days, rumors had whispered through the Persian ranks of this Turanian champion who crushed seasoned warriors with ease. Rostam, weary from years of war but still indomitable, saw only another enemy to be vanquished, not the son he'd never known existed, conceived during a fleeting love affair in a foreign kingdom. The irony is almost unbearable. Two legends bound by blood yet divided by loyalty, their duel a collision of generational pride and tragic ignorance. What makes this clash so shattering isn't just the violence, it's the near misses that could have averted disaster. When Rostam's strength fails him mid-battle, Sohrab hesitates to deliver the killing blow, inexplicably drawn to this elder warrior. Later, as Rostam lies stunned, Sohrab nearly reveals his lineage by showing the gem-studded arm band his mother gave him, a gift from Rostam himself, but destiny intervenes each time. The Shahnameh laces these moments with unbearable tension, forcing us to wonder, if one word had been spoken, one token recognized, would history have unwound differently? It's a masterclass in dramatic irony, where the audience sees the truth the characters cannot. Then comes the fatal strike. Rostam, sensing defeat, taps into the supernatural prowess reserved for his most desperate battles, the divine glory granted to Persian heroes. His sword finds its mark, and as Sohrab collapses, the young warrior gasps a revelation that tears the world asunder: his father's identity, his mother's name, the cruel joke of their shared blood. Rustam's denial is visceral. He tears open Sohrab's tunic, revealing the armband he'd once bestowed, and the horror crashes over him like a wave. Here, Ferdowsi's language soars into poetry. Rostam's wails are the sound of a lion whose cub has been slain, his grief so raw it silences the battlefield. This tragedy echoes far beyond Persian lore. Compare it to the Irish Cu Chulainn unknowingly killing his son Cynla, or the Greek Theseus abandoning his son Hippolytus with fatal consequences. These myths share a haunting truth: heroes are often doomed to destroy what they cherish most. But Sohrab's death is unique in its intimacy. The moment Rostam clutches his son's body, begging the healers to save him, offering his entire fortune, his very life in exchange. When Sohrab whispers, "This was always my fate," it's not resignation, it's an indictment of the heroic code itself. The Shahnameh doesn't let Rostam or us off easily. His grief is a fire that refines him, burning away arrogance to reveal a humanity rarely shown in his earlier exploits. The aftermath is equally devastating. Rustam carries Sohrab's body back to the boy's mother, Tamina, fulfilling a promise made in dying breaths. Her screams upon seeing her son's corpse mirror Rostam's own anguish, binding them in a grief that transcends rival kingdoms. This isn't just personal tragedy, it's geopolitical. Sohrab's death becomes a wound between Persia and Turan, ensuring generations of bloodshed. Ferdowsi underscores the futility. Had Rostam known, had Sohrab spoken sooner, empires might have been spared rivers of blood. Archaeology offers a poignant footnote. In ancient Persian burial sites, warriors were often interred with tokens of lineage: seals, jewelry, inscribed blades, perhaps to prevent such tragedies in the afterlife. The Shahnameh's themes clearly resonated in real-world rituals. Even today, Iranian parents touch the Shahnameh to their children's brows, as if to ward off Sohrab's fate, while poets invoke his name to speak of lost potential. The duel's true power lies in its duality. Rostam emerges victorious yet shattered, his heroism forever stained. Sohrab dies not as a foe, but as a promise unfulfilled, a reminder that even the mightiest are puppets of forces beyond their grasp. And therein lies Ferdowsi's genius. He crafts a myth that feels less like ancient legend and more like a mirror, reflecting our own struggles with pride, legacy, and the crushing weight of what might have been. The mist over Camlan hangs thick with foreboding as King Arthur raises Excalibur one final time, the blade catching the pale light like a shard of doomed hope. This isn't just a battle, it's the unraveling of a legend. Medieval chroniclers like Geoffrey of Monmouth painted Camlan as the tragic climax of Arthur's reign, where the king's own kin, the traitor Mordred, turns the Round Table's brotherhood to ashes. But dig beneath the layers of chivalric romance, and you'll find something even more fascinating: a shadowy reflection of post-Roman Britain's collapse, where crumbling forts and Saxon invasions bled into myth. Mordred's betrayal strikes at the heart of Arthur's ideals, while later versions like Mallory's La Morte d'Arthur frame him as Arthur's illegitimate son. Earlier Welsh texts hint at a more complex figure. In the Annals Cambrii, Mordred is simply Medraut, a rival warlord with no explicit familial tie. The shift to a father-son conflict wasn't just dramatic flair, it mirrored medieval Europe's obsession with dynastic treachery, where royal sons often became their father's deadliest threats. Yet the core tragedy remains. Camlan is a battle of mirrors where Arthur faces the corruption of his own dream. The Round Table's unity shatters, not by external foes, but from within, a metaphor for how empires often crumble from internal rot long before invaders breach the gates. Historically, Camlann might echo the chaos of 5th and 6th century Britain. After Rome withdrew its legions in 410, local warlords like the possibly historical Arthur fought to hold back Saxon settlers. Archaeological evidence from sites like Cadbury Castle, a hill fort linked to Camelot, shows hasty refortifications during this period, suggesting desperate last stands. The Welsh triads mention a Battle of Camlann around 537, though whether it involved a king named Arthur is lost to time. What's compelling is how medieval writers fuse these fragments with myth. Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing in the 12th century, spun Camlann into a cosmic showdown, complete with prophetic dreams and Excalibur's return to the Lady of the Lake. The battle's ambiguity only deepens its power. Some versions claim Arthur and Mordred slew each other simultaneously, Arthur's spear through Mordred's body, Mordred's sword through Arthur's skull. Others, like the alliterative Mort Arthur, describe Arthur dying not on the field, but carried to Avalon by shadowy figures, his fate teasingly unresolved. This duality, defeat and hope, death and rebirth, resonated with audiences living through their own upheavals: the Crusades, the Black Death, the Wars of the Roses. Camlann wasn't just a story, it was a coping mechanism, a way to process loss through legend. Even the landscape bends to the myth. Modern historians debate Camlann's possible locations, from the River Camel in Cornwall to Hadrian's Wall, where late Roman troops might have made a final stand. Local folklore adds layers. In Somerset, villagers once pointed to Arthur's grave, a Neolithic barrow, while Welsh bards sang of Camlann's crows feasting for 7 years. These details, however fanciful, root the tale in real geography, blurring the line between folklore and collective memory. What makes Camlann endure isn't its spectacle, but its intimacy. This is a war where the greatest casualty isn't a king, it's an idea. Arthur's vision of justice dies with him, leaving behind a Britain as fractured as the one he tried to unite. Medieval audiences would have recognized the irony. Their own kingdoms, forged from Arthur's mythic ashes, repeated the same cycles of betrayal and collapse. And perhaps that's the lesson woven into Camlann's bloody soil, that no golden age lasts forever, but neither does it truly end. It simply waits, like Arthur in Avalon, for the hour of its return. The waters of the mystical lake shimmer as a hand clad in white samite rises from the depths, gripping a blade forged not of mortal hands, Excalibur, the sword of promised kingship. This isn't just a weapon, it's a covenant between the divine and the earthly, a symbol of legitimacy wrapped in enigma. The Lady of the Lake, often depicted as a serene figure in later medieval romances, has roots far older and wilder than her chivalric portrayal. In Celtic mythology, bodies of water were thresholds to the other world, guarded by deities like Coventina or Nimue, who could bestow gifts or curses with equal ease. When Arthur receives Excalibur from these waters, he isn't just gaining a sword, he's inheriting a lineage of sovereignty myths that stretch back to pre-Roman Britain, where sacred blades were ritually deposited in lakes as offerings to the gods. Excalibur's magic isn't merely in its indestructible edge or gleaming hilt. Its scabbard, often overlooked, holds the real power, the ability to prevent fatal wounds, ensuring Arthur's survival so long as he wears it. This detail whispers of ancient Druidic lore, where protective charms and talismans were as vital as the weapons themselves. Compare this to the Irish Lia Fail, the stone of destiny that roared when touched by the rightful king, or the Welsh Dienwyn, a flaming sword that refused to burn the worthy. These weren't just plot devices, they were narrative embodiments of a deeper truth. True rulers were chosen by forces beyond human courts, their worthiness tested by supernatural means. Merlin's role in this drama adds another layer of Celtic complexity. Often portrayed as Arthur's advisor, the wizard's origins lie in figures like Méadin Wilt, a mad prophet of Welsh legend who fled into the forest after witnessing the horrors of war. His prophecies, especially those about Arthur's rise and fall, paralleled the cryptic visions of Celtic seers, who spoke in riddles that only time could decipher. When Merlin orchestrates the sword in the stone trial, a later addition to the mythos, he's invoking the same archetype as the Morrigan, the Irish goddess who decided fates on the battlefield. Power in these stories is never simply taken, it's bestowed, often at a price. Archaeology lends eerie weight to these tales. In reality, Bronze and Iron Age warriors did deposit swords, shields, and cauldrons into lakes and bogs, not as casual discards, but as deliberate votive acts. The Thames alone has yielded over 200 ancient blades, their edges ritually bent to kill them before offering. These sacred hoards suggest a world where water wasn't just a resource, but a living entity to be appeased. The Lady of the Lake, then, might be a medieval echo of these practices, her gift of Excalibur a mythic memory of real rights linking kingship to divine approval. Yet Excalibur's journey doesn't end with Arthur's triumphs. It's returned to the lake by Sir Bedivere after Camlan closes a sacred circle, the waters reclaiming what they lent. This moment, often overshadowed by Arthur's death, is the keystone of the legend. In Celtic belief, gifts to the gods couldn't be kept forever, they were loans, to be honored and returned. The sword's disappearance into the mist isn't just an ending, it's a promise. Like Arthur's whispered fate in Avalon, Excalibur's vanishing suggests that some powers are too great for mortals to hold indefinitely. They belong to the land itself, waiting like the tide to be drawn forth once more. The humid air of the underworld presses down as the hero twins, Hunapu and Exbalank, descend into Xibalba's depths, where shadows whisper and the very walls seem to breathe malice. This isn't just a mythic journey, it's a high-stakes game of survival against the Lords of Death, played in a court where the ball symbolizes the sun's perilous path through the night. The Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the K'ich Maya, spins this tale not as mere entertainment, but as a cosmic allegory woven into the fabric of Mesoamerican life. Every bounce of the rubber ball echoes the cycles of maize growing in the fields, the risings and settings of celestial bodies, and the unending struggle between light and darkness. Xibalba's lords aren't ordinary foes, they're masters of psychological warfare, their very names dripping with dread. One Death and Seven Death, Pus Master and Jaundice Master, beings who embody disease, decay, and the inevitability of the grave. When they challenge the twins to their deadly ballgame, the stakes couldn't be higher. Lose, and the twins face dismemberment like their father before them, his skull hung from a barren calabash tree as a grisly trophy. Win, and they risk angering deities who despise being outplayed by mortals, yet the twins don't rely on brute strength alone. Their greatest weapon is wit, in mocking the Lord's illusions, turning their traps against them, and even sacrificing each other only to resurrect in a breathtaking display of supernatural cunning. The game itself is layered with symbolism. The ball court, a recurring feature in Maya cities like Chichen Itza, wasn't just a sports arena, it was a portal to the underworld, its parallel walls representing the liminal space between life and death. Players, often nobles or warriors, reenacted this mythic contest, their heavy padding a feeble defense against the bruising rubber ball, which could weigh up to 9 pounds. Scoring points wasn't merely athletic, it was a ritual act, aligning human endeavor with cosmic order. Some scholars argue that the ball's movement mirrored Venus's erratic orbit, a celestial body the Maya tracked with obsessive precision for its supposed influence on war and agriculture. But the twins' battle transcends sport. When the lords force them into the House of Gloom, the House of Knives, and the House of Fire, each trial mirrors the hazards of the agricultural cycle: drought, blight, and burning fields before the rains return. The twins' eventual victory, tricking the lords into sacrificing themselves and grinding their bones into dust, isn't just revenge, it's a promise. Death isn't an end, but a transformation. Their father, the maize god, is resurrected, his bones sprouting into new life like tender corn shoots breaking through the soil. archaeology breathes chilling life into this myth. Tomb paintings at San Bartolo depict the maize god's resurrection alongside the twins, while ceramic vessels show ball players adorned with skeletal masks, embodying the lords they hope to outwit. Even the gruesome fate of the twins' father finds echoes in real Maya practices. Enemies' skulls were sometimes mounted on racks, just as his was hung from the tree. The Popol Vuh's genius lies in its duality. It's both a creation story and a survival guide, teaching that resilience in the face of darkness is woven into the very rhythm of the world. So when the twins ascend from Xibalba as the sun and moon, their triumph isn't just personal, it's a celestial blueprint. Their journey reminds us that every planting season, every sunrise, is a hard-won victory against chaos. The ball game never truly ends, it simply waits, like the lords in their shadowy realm, for the next players to step onto the court. The mountain air crackles with divine energy as the Ir brothers emerge from the caves of Pakaritambo, 4 siblings born not of woman but of the earth itself, destined to carve an empire from the Andean peaks. Their story begins not with peaceful migration, but with fratricidal strife, a bloody contest where only the strongest would survive to rule. Manco Capac, the golden-haired brother, carries a staff that pulses with the power of Intai, the sun god, while his siblings wield equally mystical gifts. Yet these aren't mere deities in a creation myth. They embody the brutal realities of Inca expansion, where divine mandate and military might intertwine to forge South America's greatest empire. The brothers' journey reads like a strategic conquest manual disguised as legend. Their first act, the calculated murder of Ayarkachai, whose supernatural strength and fiery temper threaten their mission. Tricked into returning to the Cave of Origin to retrieve sacred relics, Kachai is sealed inside by his own kin, an act of betrayal that mirrors the Incas' real-world suppression of rival clans. The message is clear: unity under one leader isn't achieved through consensus, but through the elimination of dissent. This theme repeats when Ir Uchu is petrified atop Huanakori, transformed into a sacred stone idol. What seems like divine intervention may instead encode the Inca practice of ancestor worship, where mummified rulers retained political influence even in death, their physical presence on mountain tops, a constant reminder of authority's unbroken chain. Manco Capac's final test comes at the Valley of Cusco, where his golden staff sinks effortlessly into the earth, signaling the sun god's approval, but this peaceful imagery belies the violence to come. Archaeological evidence reveals Cusco wasn't uninhabited paradise, it was home to the Kilk people, whose pottery and fortifications predate Inca dominance. The myth glosses over the displacement and assimilation that surely followed, framing conquest as divine will rather than territorial ambition. The staff's miracle justifies what history would later confirm: the Incas' unmatched ability to absorb defeated cultures, weaving their gods and traditions into an imperial tapestry that legitimized their rule. What makes this myth so compelling is its duality. The Ir brothers' struggles, betrayal, transformation, and the triumph of one lineage mirror the Incas' own rise from a small Andean tribe to masters of Tahuantinsuyo, the Four Corners Empire. Their sacred origins provided a blueprint for governance, where the Sapa Inca ruled as both king and living god, his authority unchallengeable as Intai's rays. Yet the violence simmering beneath the legend hints at darker truths. Just as Manco Capac's victory required his brother's removal, real Inca expansion relied on strategic marriages, military campaigns, and the ruthless quashing of rebellion. Modern Cusco still bears witness to this mythic past. The Coricancha temple's walls, once plated in gold to honor Intai, stand atop Kilk foundations, a physical manifestation of imperial overlay. Annual festivals like Intai Raymi reenact Manco Capac's arrival, blending pageantry with historical memory. Even the landscape itself, the caves, the sacred stones, serves as a reminder that for the Inca, myth wasn't just storytelling. It was the armor of conquest, gilding the sword of empire with the luster of celestial destiny. The Ir brothers' legacy endures not as a quaint folktale, but as a masterclass in political myth-making. By framing their origins as both divinely ordained and fiercely contested, the Inca crafted an identity that justified their dominance while acknowledging the brutal realities of statecraft. Their empire may have fallen to Spanish steel, but the stones of Cusco still whisper their names not as gods or men, but as architects of a world where power and prophecy were forged in the same crucible. The cedar forest looms before them, its towering trunks whispering secrets older than kings, older than gods themselves. Gilgamesh, the swaggering ruler of Uruk, grips his axe with the confidence of a man who's never known fear. Beside him stands Enkidu, the wild-born warrior turned brother in arms, his muscles tense not just for battle, but at the forest's eerie quiet. This isn't just a quest for timber to build grand gates, it's a confrontation with the untamed soul of nature, embodied in the monstrous Humbaba, guardian of the sacred grove. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving epic, frames this clash as more than a hero's feat. It's a spiritual reckoning, a collision between civilization's hunger and the wild's last stand. Humbaba isn't your typical monster, described as a giant with a face of coiled intestines and a roar like floodwaters. He's less a mindless beast than a divine enforcer, placed by the gods to protect the cedars from mortal greed. His very presence warps the forest, trees bend toward him like worshippers, and the air thrums with a primordial energy. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu enter his domain, they aren't just hacking through undergrowth, they're violating a sanctuary. Ancient Mesopotamians saw forests as liminal spaces, thresholds between the human and divine. Humbaba's 7 layers of armor, each glowing with a terrifying radiance, symbolize the layers of spiritual protection surrounding sacred ground. To slay him isn't just victory, it's sacrilege, yet Gilgamesh's motives are layered too. His bravado masks a deeper terror not of Humbaba, but of his own mortality. The forest guardian's taunts cut to the core. Who is this mortal who dares to challenge the god's decree? For all his royal swagger, Gilgamesh is just a man, and Humbaba's voice echoes the inevitability of death that haunts him. Enkidu, raised among beasts, understands the cost of this fight better than his king. His hesitation isn't cowardice, it's the pang of kinship. Humbaba, like him, is an outsider, a creature of wilderness thrust into the orbit of civilization's hunger. The battle itself is a masterclass in mythic ambiguity. Gilgamesh and Enkidu don't overpower Humbaba through strength alone, they exploit his divine nature. When the sun god Shamash intervenes, hurling 13 winds to disorient the guardian, it's not just aid, it's a celestial betrayal. Humbaba's final moments are haunting. He pleads for mercy, offering Gilgamesh the cedars and his own servitude. Enkidu, pragmatic and ruthless, urges the killing blow, sealing their victory. But as Humbaba's head falls, the forest falls silent. The cedars themselves seem to weep resin like tears. This isn't triumph, it's a tipping point. Archaeology breathes life into the symbolism. Mesopotamian cities relied on imported cedar for temples and palaces, their demand ravaging distant Lebanon's forests. Tablets from merry detail logging expeditions, echoing Gilgamesh's quest. Even Humbaba's face, those coiled entrails, finds echoes in Mesopotamian art, where hybrid beings guarded sacred spaces. The epic's genius lies in its prescience. It foreshadows humanity's Faustian bargain with nature, where progress comes at the cost of desecration. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk with cedar gates so grand, the ancients could never have dreamed their like, but the victory is bittersweet. Enkidu's later death, a punishment from the gods for their arrogance, underscores the lesson. Humbaba wasn't just a monster to be slain. He was a mirror, reflecting the consequences of unchecked ambition. The cedars, once protected, now feed the very civilization that will, in time, consume them. And in that irony, the epic whispers a question still relevant today: when we conquer the wild, what do we truly lose? The scorching winds of Uruk carry the scent of burnt offerings as Ishtar, goddess of love and war, descends from the heavens in a rage. Her proposal to Gilgamesh, an offer of marriage, of divine favor, has been met not with reverence, but with brutal mockery. The king recounts her litany of doomed lovers like a tavern tale, each tragedy more gruesome than the last: the shepherd turned wolf, the gardener transformed into a frog. This isn't just rejection, it's sacrilege, a mortal spitting in the face of divinity. Ishtar's wrath takes tangible form as she unleashes the bull of heaven, a beast whose very footsteps split the earth like clay tablets under a scribe's stylus. The bull's arrival is an ecological catastrophe. With its first snort, cracks spider web across Uruk's fields, swallowing crops and irrigation channels. Its second breath withers orchards, leaving fruit to rot on the branch. This isn't merely a rampaging animal, it's the embodiment of Mesopotamia's deepest terrors: drought and famine made flesh. Ancient texts describe similar calamities when gods withdrew their favor. The lament for Ur paints a nearly identical picture of cracked earth and desperate hunger. For an agricultural society reliant on the Tigris and Euphrates whims, the bull's fury strikes at civilization's fragile foundations. Gilgamesh and Enkidu's battle strategy reveals their hard-won wisdom. Unlike their reckless charge into Humbaba's forest, here they fight with precision. Enkidu, still carrying the wild's intuition, seizes the bull's horns, forcing its head down like a farmer subduing an unruly ox. Gilgamesh strikes not at random, but at the spine, a killing blow borrowed from lion hunts depicted on palace reliefs. Their teamwork inverts Mesopotamian hunting scenes, where kings stood alone atop slain beasts to proclaim their dominance. This is partnership, not propaganda. When Enkidu hurls the bull's severed thigh at Ishtar, the act resonates with shocking symbolism. In rituals, bull thighs were offerings to appease gods, and here, it's a bloodied insult. The gesture mirrors real-life temple practices where animal parts were arranged for divination. By weaponizing sacrifice, Enkidu crosses a line even Gilgamesh hesitates to approach. The priests of Uruk likely gasped at this detail, recognizing the taboo, mortal hands altering the sacred order of offerings, yet the victory is Pyrrhic. The gods convene like a council of warlords, debating retribution for the bull's slaying and Humbaba's death. Their verdict falls not on Gilgamesh, but Enkidu, the wild man turned loyal friend. His fatal illness, described with heartbreaking specificity, fever-like, a kiln's fire, joints stiff as rusty armor, mirrors real-world zoonotic diseases Mesopotamians feared from animal encounters. The bull's curse isn't lightning from the sky, it's the intimate terror of a body betraying itself, a reminder that even legendary strength bows to biology. Tablets from Nineveh preserve the aftermath in aching detail. Enkidu's deathbed visions of the underworld where souls wear feather cloaks of dust draw from actual necromantic texts. His lament, "Would that I had left the gate in its cedar frame," cuts deeper than any battle wound. The gate refers not just to Humbaba's forest, but to thresholds crossed, from wild to civilized, from anonymity to brotherhood, and now to the final passage no hero can avoid. Archaeology whispers corroborations. Bull-slaying scenes dominate early dynastic cylinder seals, often showing bearded heroes grappling horned beasts, prototypes for Gilgamesh and Enkidu. At Telharmal, a clay model of a bull's heart inscribed with cuneiform prayers, suggests these myths informed real rituals. The Bull of Heaven wasn't just a story, it was a lens through which Mesopotamians processed environmental disaster and mortal vulnerability. Gilgamesh's journey shifts irrevocably after this battle. The bull's rampage and Enkidu's death strip away his illusions of invincibility. Where earlier tablets boasted of his superhuman feats, now the epic turns inward, probing grief's uncharted depths. The mightiest king in Mesopotamia learns the hardest lesson. Some beasts can't be slain, only endured time, loss, and the unrelenting hunger for meaning that follows even the greatest of victories. The drums of Mali thrum like a heartbeat in the night as Sundiata Keita, the boy who could not walk, drags himself across the dirt on all fours. His mother, Sogolin, watches with tears in her eyes, not of pity, but of grim determination. This child, mocked as the lion's cripple, would one day rise to forge the greatest empire West Africa had ever seen, but legends aren't born in palaces, they're forged in exile, in battles against impossible odds, and in the moment a sorcerer king learns that some mortals cannot be broken. Sundiata's story unfolds like an epic woven on moonlit nights by griots, the poets and historians who preserved Mali's memory through song. Born to the Mandinka people in the 13th century, his childhood was shadowed by prophecy. Soothsayers whispered he would overshadow his father's other heirs, a prediction that made him a target. When the cruel sorcerer King Salmayoro Kante of Sasso began devouring neighboring kingdoms, burning villages and enslaving warriors, Sundiata's family was torn apart. His half-brothers, puppets of Salmayoro, forced him into exile, a humiliation that became his crucible. For years, Sundiata wandered the savannah, gathering allies like a storm gathers clouds. Among the Mema people, he learned the arts of war, his once crippled legs now strong enough to wield an iron-tipped spear, but Salmayoro was no ordinary foe. Cloaked in dark magic, his skin was said to repel blades, his palace walls lined with the skulls of vanquished kings. When Sundiata finally returned to challenge him, the battlefield became a theater of gods and men. At Kyrene, their armies clashed, but the real duel was one of wills. The griots sing of Sundiata's cunning. Knowing steel couldn't pierce Salmayoro's sorcery, he armed his archers with arrows tipped in the only substance the sorcerer feared, the spur of a white rooster. As the sun reached its zenith, Sundiata himself loosed the fateful shot. The arrow found its mark, and Salmayoro's invincibility shattered like glass. His retreat wasn't just a military defeat, it was the unraveling of a tyrant's myth. The Sasso Empire crumbled, and in its place rose Mali, a kingdom of gold and learning that would stretch from the Sahara to the rainforest. But here's where history blurs into poetry. The griots claim Sundiata didn't just conquer, he transformed. His Kurukan Fuga charter, engraved not on parchment but in living memory, laid the groundwork for human rights centuries before the Magna Carta. He abolished slavery, protected religious freedom, and governed through councils rather than decree. The Lion King wasn't merely a warrior, he was a philosopher king who understood that empires built on fear die young, while those rooted in justice endure. Modern archaeology whispers corroboration. At the site of Nyani, Sundiata's capital, excavators found remnants of vast trade networks, copper from the north, gold from the south, proof of the economic web he spun. The Janneh manuscripts, rescued from Timbuktu's sands, speak of a Mali where scholars and merchants thrived under his laws. Even Salmayoro's legend has roots. The ruins of Kumbai Sale reveal a fortress with walls stained red, perhaps the origin of his blood-drenched palace in oral lore. Yet the truest testament to Sundiata's saga isn't in stone or parchment, it's in the griots' unbroken chain of memory. When you hear them sing of the baobab tree that shaded his first steps, or the golden crocodile that guided him home, you're not just hearing a story. You're witnessing a civilization's soul, passed mouth to ear for 800 years. That's the power of myth. It turns history into heartbeat, and kings into legends that refuse to die. The night before the Battle of Kyrene hummed with more than just the whispers of soldiers, it crackled with the energy of unseen forces. Sundiata Keita, the once crippled prince now standing tall, knew this fight wouldn't be won by spears alone. Across the field, Salmayoro Kante, the sorcerer king, conjured storms from his 7-story tower, his body smeared with oils that turned blades aside like water. But Sundiata had weapons no armor could repel, the secrets of his own lineage, whispered to him by the very spirits of the land. His mother, Sogolin, wasn't just a woman, She was the Buffalo Woman, a shape-shifting sorceress whose bloodline carried ancient protections. Before the battle, she taught him to craft the only arrow that could pierce Salmaoro's magic, one tipped with the spur of a white rooster, a creature sacred to the ancestors for its power to break enchantments. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a reflection of Mali's deep spiritual tapestry. In Mandinka cosmology, the natural and supernatural worlds were intertwined like the roots of the baobab tree. Warriors consulted marabouts, Islamic holy men who inscribed verses from the Quran onto leather amulets, while hunters paid homage to bush spirits through rituals older than memory. Salmaoro's infamous magic balafon, a xylophone whose notes could summon armies of shadows, wasn't just a folktale flourish, it mirrored real West African traditions where music bridged the human and spirit realms. Even Sundiata's transformation from cripple to conqueror carried echoes of initiation rites, where boys endured trials to emerge as men under the watchful eyes of ancestors. The battle itself unfolded like a chess game between rival sorcerers. When Salmaoro's cavalry charged, Sundiata's archers loosed their white spur arrows not at the riders, but at their horses' shadows, a tactic rooted in the belief that a man's soul could be struck through his reflection. As the shafts found their marks, horses reared, throwing riders into chaos. Salmaoro, watching from his iron-plated litter, unleashed his final weapon, a swarm of enchanted bees, their venom said to rot flesh within hours. But Sundiata's sister, Nana Triben, had already infiltrated the sorcerer's court as a captive. Learning his secrets, she revealed his one weakness: water from the sacred Wagadu springs, which Sundiata's shamans used to brew antidotes for their troops. What's fascinating is how these supernatural elements mirror real-world strategies. Salmaoro's invincibility might have been psychological warfare, his body coated in a resin that made blades glance off, amplifying his myth. The white rooster spur, historians suggest it could have been dipped in a paralyzing toxin, lending credence to the idea it broke his magic. Even the bees may have been trained, as some West African cultures kept aggressive hives as weapons. The line between legend and tactic blurs, showing how mythologies often encode practical knowledge. Yet the greatest magic wasn't in spells or arrows, it was in Sundiata's ability to unite. The griots sing of how he bound the Mandinka clans not just by sword, but by honoring their diverse spiritual traditions. Muslim scholars, animist priests, and ancestor worshippers all found a place in his empire. His victory at Kyrene wasn't just the fall of a tyrant, it was the birth of a nation where the seen and unseen worlds could coexist. Long after his death, villagers left offerings at the rock where he allegedly slew Salmaoro, proof that in Mali, history and myth were never truly separate, just different notes on the same balafon. The heavens tremble as Perun, the Slavic god of thunder, raises his gleaming axe, its edge crackling with celestial fury. Below him, coiled in the roots of the world tree, lurks Veel's shapeshifting serpent, lord of the underworld and thief of divine cattle. Their eternal battle isn't just a clash of gods, it's the very rhythm of Slavic existence, woven into the turning of seasons, the flooding of rivers, and the whispered warnings of grandmothers around winter fires. This myth isn't mere storytelling, it's a cosmic blueprint, explaining why lightning splits oak trees, why spring conquers winter, and why some secrets slither beneath the earth, waiting to be unearthed. Perun's domain is the open sky, the high places where eagles nest. His chariot, drawn by goats with hooves of iron, rumbles across storm clouds, and his beard red as forge fire flickers with each thunderclap. Farmers carved his six-spoked wheel into door frames to ward off evil, while warriors drank from horns engraved with his sigil before battle. But Veels is no simple villain. As god of cattle and magic and the liminal spaces between worlds, he slithers through boundaries, between field and forest, life and death, order and chaos. When he steals Perun's celestial herd, a metaphor for storm clouds stolen from the sky, he doesn't just provoke the thunder god, he disrupts the natural order, plunging the world into drought or unending rain until balance is restored. Their battles follow a sacred geography. Perun strikes Veles from the heights of the world tree, driving him underground, where the serpent transforms into rivers that nourish the earth. Archaeologists find echoes of this duel in Slavic burial mounds, where axes Perun's symbol are placed near springs, marking the contested border between realms. Even Christian missionaries couldn't erase this duality. Saint Elijah inherited Perun's lightning, while Saint Nicholas adopted Veles's role as protector of shepherds, proving how deeply these forces were etched into the Slavic soul. Yet the true genius of this myth lies in its cyclical nature. Each year, Veles rises with the autumn mists, stealing the sun's warmth and locking it in his underworld halls. Perun's winter slumber mirrors the dormancy of nature until the spring equinox, when the god awakens, splitting the earth with his lightning to free the waters and Veles's stolen bounty, ensuring crops will grow again. Folk rituals preserve this drama. Villagers would drown effigies of Veles in rivers at harvest, then burn them in bonfires as Perun's triumph. These weren't mere pageants, they were acts of cosmic maintenance, ensuring the god's struggle stayed in equilibrium. What's haunting is how Veles, though cast as the adversary, remains indispensable. Without his cunning, there would be no rain from stolen clouds, no fertile silt from flooded rivers, no hidden knowledge passed through his serpentine whispers. The Slavs understood that chaos isn't the enemy of order, it's its counterpart, the shadow that gives light its meaning. Their myths refused easy morals, acknowledging that even gods must dance this eternal duel, their strife the engine of the world's renewal. And in that tension between the axe and the serpent, we glimpse a truth as old as the first storm. Creation and destruction aren't opposites, they're partners, locked in an embrace as intimate as it is inevitable. The frozen waters of Pohjola echo with the clang of swords and the haunting chants of shamans as Väinämöinen, the ancient bard hero of Finland, leads his people in a desperate raid for the Sampo, a magical artifact forged in the underworld's shadows. This isn't just a treasure hunt, it's a battle for the soul of a nation. The Sampo, described as a mill that grinds out endless salt, grain, and gold, represents something far greater than material wealth. To the Finns who sang these tales around winter fires, it was the heartbeat of survival itself, a symbol of the fragile balance between human ingenuity and nature's brutal whims. Its theft from the dark sorceress Lauhai of Pohjola sparks a war as primal as the Arctic winds, where heroes and villains blur like the aurora's shimmering ribbons. Väinämöinen is no conventional warrior. His power lies not in muscle but in wisdom and song, a reflection of Finland's deep shamanic roots. Armed with his cantel, a harp crafted from the jawbone of a giant pike, he can charm the very elements into submission, lulling storms to sleep or coaxing trees to dance. His rivalry with Lauhai, a shape-shifting mistress of curses, mirrors the eternal struggle between light and dark, warmth and cold. When she conjures a monstrous bear to slaughter his kinsmen or sends plagues of iron hail, Väinämöinen encounters not with brute force, but with spells older than memory, his voice weaving reality itself. The Sampo wars are fought as much with incantations as with swords, where every verse carries the weight of an army. What makes this conflict so compelling is its grounding in lived experience. The Kalevala, compiled in the 19th century from oral traditions, preserves Finland's ancestral fears and hopes. Lauhai's Pohjola isn't just a mythical North, it's the literal Arctic wilderness that threatened Finnish villages with starvation and frostbite. The Sampo's destruction during the final battle, its fragments lost at sea, becomes a poignant metaphor for Finland's own resilience. The fragments that wash ashore, a millstone, a lid, still bless the land with fertility, suggesting that even in ruin, there's enough to endure. This wasn't just storytelling, it was a survival manual disguised as epic poetry, teaching generations how to find abundance in scarcity. Archaeology whispers echoes of these myths. Bronze Age petroglyphs along Finland's lakes depict shamans with drum-like instruments, their bodies arched in ecstatic trance, while Iron Age artifacts include miniature amulet mills, possible Sampo prototypes. Even Lauhai's shape-shifting finds parallels in Sami Nowidi traditions, where spirit workers could become birds or wolves. The Kalevala's genius lies in its duality. It's both a fantastical saga and a coded history of Finland's cultural resistance, first against Swedish and Russian domination, then against the erasure of indigenous Baltic Finnic identity. When Väinämöinen finally sails into the horizon, leaving his cantel behind as a gift to his people, the message is clear: magic isn't in objects, but in the songs we pass down. The Sampo may be gone, but its legacy, like Finland's icy rivers, flows ever onward, a reminder that the truest treasures are the stories we fight to preserve. The air over the Valley of Mexico hung thick with the scent of copal incense and the metallic tang of blood, as two armies faced each other not for territory or plunder, but for the honor of feeding the gods themselves. These were the Zachiayayatl, the Flower Wars, ritual battles where Aztec warriors sought not to kill, but to capture. Imagine the scene: elite jaguar and eagle warriors clashing with obsidian-studded clubs, their blows calculated to maim rather than slaughter, all under the watchful gaze of priests chanting hymns to Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird god whose thirst for sacrifice kept the sun rising. To the Spanish conquistadors who witnessed these conflicts, they were proof of Aztec barbarity, but peel back the layers, and you'll find a complex system of faith, politics, and cosmic duty woven into every strike. At first glance, the Flower Wars seem paradoxical. Why would the mighty Aztec Empire, capable of crushing rebellions with terrifying efficiency, engage in battles with prearranged rules and no territorial gain? The answer lies in the Aztec understanding of the universe. They believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the fifth sun, the current era, and in return, humanity owed them a debt paid in Chalchihuatl, the precious liquid of life, blood. Without it, the sun would halt, the world would plunge into eternal night, and chaos would reign. But not just any blood would do. The most potent offerings came from warriors, men whose vitality could nourish the gods. Thus, the Flower Wars became a sacred harvesting ground, where captives were taken alive to meet their fate atop the Great Pyramids, their hearts offered to the heavens while still beating. The battles themselves were orchestrated with precision. Unlike the all-out destruction of conquest wars, Flower Wars followed strict protocols. Combatants were typically matched in skill, often between the Aztecs and their rival city-states like Tlaxcala. Weapons were designed to incapacitate. Obsidian Macuahuitl swords could shatter bones with their razor-sharp blades, while warriors trained to grapple and subdue rather than kill. The aftermath was equally ritualized. Captives were paraded through cities, treated with a mix of reverence and cruelty, honored as vessels of divine sustenance, yet destined for the sacrificial stone. Some even lived for months in captivity, given the chance to fight again in gladiatorial spectacles before their final sacrifice. But the Flower Wars weren't just about religion, they were a tool of imperial control. By maintaining a constant low-intensity conflict with rivals like Tlaxcala, the Aztecs ensured these states remained weakened, reliant on Tenochtitlan's whims. It was a deadly balance: allow enemies to survive as a source of sacrifices, but never let them grow strong enough to revolt. This strategy, however, would backfire catastrophically when the Spanish arrived. The Tlaxcalans, hardened by decades of Flower Wars, saw Hernán Cortés as a chance for vengeance. Their alliance with the conquistadors wasn't just political, it was the culmination of generations of ritualized bloodshed turned into all-out war. What's often overlooked is how the Spanish weaponized the Flower Wars narrative. Cortés' letters to King Charles V painted the Aztecs as bloodthirsty fanatics, using their rituals to justify conquest as a divine mandate. Colonial friars like Bernardino de Sahagún recorded the wars in meticulous detail, but through a lens that emphasized Aztec savagery, obscuring their spiritual and strategic nuances. Modern archaeology tells a different story. Excavations at the Templo Mayor reveal offerings of jade and coral alongside human remains, proof that sacrifice was embedded in a broader cosmology of exchange and reciprocity. Even the term flower war is debated. Some scholars argue flowery death might be more accurate, evoking the Aztec belief that fallen warriors became hummingbirds, feeding the sun with their essence. The legacy of the flower wars lingers in Mexico's collective memory. Descendants of the Aztecs, like the Nahua people, still recount tales of these battles, though stripped of colonial sensationalism. Meanwhile, the ruins of Tenochtitlan whisper a cautionary tale, a civilization so convinced of its divine mandate that it couldn't see the threat lurking beyond its ritual battlegrounds. In the end, the flower wars weren't just a footnote in the Aztec collapse, they were a mirror, reflecting the paradox of an empire that sought to sustain the cosmos, yet couldn't protect itself from the tides of history. The dust of the Yellow River Valley swirled like a living thing as two armies faced each other across the plains of Zhuolu, their very existence hanging in the balance. This wasn't just a battle, it was the cosmic struggle between order and chaos, a clash that would echo through Chinese identity for millennia. On one side stood the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, revered as the architect of civilization itself, his forces armed with bronze weapons and tactics honed through wisdom. Opposing him loomed Kaiyu, the rebel king of the Nine Lai tribes, a monstrous figure with a bull's head, iron horns, and 90 brothers who commanded the wind and fog itself. The stakes nothing less than the soul of China. Huangdi's legend paints him as more than a conqueror, he was a cultural unifier, credited with inventing everything from silk to the compass. But Kaiyu represented something older, the untamed forces of nature and the restless tribes who resisted assimilation. Their conflict transcends mere historical rivalry, it's the foundational myth of Han supremacy, a story etched into everything from imperial court rituals to modern national identity. What makes Zhuolu extraordinary isn't just the scale of the battle, but the surreal arsenal deployed. Kaiyu's mastery of weather magic seems lifted from fantasy. He summoned impenetrable fogs to disorient Huangdi's troops, and conjured tempests that could fling boulders like pebbles. Yet the Yellow Emperor countered with innovations that blur the line between myth and forgotten technology. Ancient texts describe mechanical chariots that moved without horses, always pointing south. Could these have been early magnetic compasses guiding troops through Kaiyu's sorcerous storms? The climax of the battle hinges on another impossible marvel, the Yellow Emperor's divine compass cart, said to pierce through illusions and dispel the Nine Lies magic. Some scholars propose this was an advanced astrolabe, harnessing celestial navigation to outmaneuver Kaiyu's weather control. Others point to descriptions of flying war kites, armed with primitive explosives, suggesting early drone-like warfare. The most haunting detail comes from the Sanhedrin, where Kaiyu's decapitated head is said to have transformed into a maple tree, its leaves dripping scarlet, as if weeping blood for eternity. This grisly metaphor might encode a deeper truth, the assimilation of Kaiyu's followers into Huangdi's empire, their rebellion crushed but their legacy enduring like stubborn roots. Archaeology adds tantalizing clues. Bronze ritual vessels from the Shang dynasty depict battle scenes echoing Zhuolu's chaos-horned warriors clashing with orderly ranks. Excavations near the Yellow River have uncovered mass graves, with skeletons bearing wounds consistent with both bronze and iron weapons, hinting at conflict between technologically mismatched forces. Most intriguingly, jade artifacts from Neolithic cultures show iconography resembling Kaiyu's bull-headed visage, suggesting his myth may have originated in real tribal resistance against early Han expansion. The Battle of Zhuolu's legacy isn't confined to ancient texts. For centuries, Chinese emperors performed ceremonies reenacting Huangdi's victory, reinforcing the mandate of heaven as a divine right earned through wisdom and innovation. Even today, Zhuolu's echoes persist, from martial arts forms mimicking the Yellow Emperor's tactics to patriotic narratives framing China's technological rise as a rebirth of his inventive spirit. Yet Kaiyu's defiance lingers too, celebrated by ethnic minorities and reclaimed as a symbol of resistance. In the end, this mythic battle isn't just about who won. It's about how civilizations forge their identity in the crucible of conflict, spinning legends from the blood and bronze of forgotten battlefields. Kaiyu's defeat at Zhuolu should have erased him from history, but instead, the bull-headed king refused to fade into oblivion. Across southern China, far from the Yellow River's heartland, his legend took on a life of its own. In regions like Hunan and Guizhou, temples sprang up not to Huangdi, the victor, but to his vanquished foe, now revered as a god of war, metallurgy, and even rain. This startling transformation reveals a truth deeper than any battlefield outcome. In China's spiritual landscape, even the enemies of order could become vessels of divine power. The Miao and Hmong peoples, whose ancestors may have been among Kaiyu's 9 Lai tribes, preserved his memory as a tragic hero. Folk songs describe him not as a monster, but as a leader who taught his people to forge iron weapons and tame floods, gifts of survival later absorbed by Huangdi's empire. During the Qixi festival, some communities still stage operas where Kaiyu battles the Yellow Emperor, their clashes blending history and myth into communal catharsis. Even his iron horns, once symbols of terror, became emblems of resilience. Miao silver headdresses today curl like bovine crescents, a silent homage to the fallen king. Imperial China's relationship with Kaiyu was far more conflicted. Emperors demonized him as the archetypal rebel, a warning against disunity, yet secretly sought his martial prowess. Tang dynasty generals invoked him before campaigns, while Ming smiths buried iron figurines of his likeness to bless their forges. This duality reflects a cultural tightrope, how to condemn a figure while coveting his power. Even modern politics couldn't escape his shadow. During the Sino-Japanese War, propaganda posters cast invaders as new Kaiyus, framing resistance as a reenactment of Huangdi's triumph. Yet in Taiwan, indigenous groups reclaim him as a symbol of anti-authoritarian defiance, proving myths are never static, only repurposed. Archaeology adds tantalizing layers to this legacy. Near the ancient battlefield, villagers still unearth bronze drums etched with bull-headed warriors, likely tribal totems absorbed into Han iconography. In Sichuan, cliff carvings show horn figures dancing with axes, their poses mirroring descriptions of Kaiyu's shamans. Most telling are the vinegar jars of Shaanxi, where farmers offer brine to crude figurines believed to house his spirit, a practice echoing pre-Han metal workers' rituals. These fragments suggest Kaiyu's worship wasn't mere folklore, but a living tradition bridging China's fractured past. Perhaps the most poignant testament to his endurance lies in contradiction. While state textbooks hail Huangdi as the father of civilization, Taichai masters whisper that Kaiyu's chaotic fighting style birthed their art. Rainmakers in Guangxi plead to him during droughts, though official records name him a demon. This dissonance isn't accidental, it's the heartbeat of a culture that understands truth isn't held by victors alone. Kaiyu's afterlife as both villain and deity reminds us that myths, like history, are mirrors. They don't just show us who won, they show us who we might have been, and who, in whispered prayers and hidden shrines, we still sometimes long to become. From the blood-soaked fields of Troy to the storm-lashed battlements of Xibalba, these 30 legendary conflicts share a tapestry of themes as timeless as war itself. Heroism never appears in isolation, whether it's Ku Chulain's warp spasm fury or Sundiata's rise from exile. Each tale reminds us that greatness is forged in the crucible of impossible odds. Yet these heroes rarely stand alone. Gods and spirits lurk at every turn, tipping the scales with divine weapons or cruel whims, from the Norse pantheon's apocalyptic interventions to Amaterasu's radiant sovereignty over Japan's fate. What's striking isn't just the supernatural spectacle, it's how these myths mirror real historical tensions, whether encoded in Celtic cattle raids or Huangdi's coalition building against the Nine Lai tribes. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're cultural survival kits. The Mahabharata's moral ambiguity, Ragnarök's cyclical destruction, and even the Sampo's shattered legacy all grapple with a universal truth: war doesn't end with the last sword stroke. It lingers in the lessons we extract, the identities we construct, and the futures we dare to imagine. Every mythical battle we've explored, whether grounded in archaeological fact or soaring flights of symbolism, offers a window into the societies that birthed them. The Aztec flower wars framed sacrifice as cosmic duty, while Aeneas's Odyssey transformed refugee trauma into imperial propaganda. Now we turn to you. Which of these legendary clashes resonated most? Was it the Trojan War's heartbreaking humanity, or the Gigantamacha's primal chaos? Perhaps you're drawn to lesser-known sagas, like the Maori's battles of supernatural deception, or the Cherokee's thunderers fighting the stone giants. Drop your favorites in the comments, and who knows, your suggestion might just inspire our next deep dive into history's shadowy crossroads, where myth and memory collide. If you've enjoyed unraveling these threads with us, hit subscribe to join the hunt for more hidden stories. After all, the past never truly fades, it only waits for the right storyteller to breathe it back to life.